any further ado, it is my privilege and honor to introduce our friend and leader in the space of value creation. Channing Hamlet is going to share with us today. Let me get this right, Channing, so I introduced you correctly. He's going to share with you about business value creation and how not to leave money on the table when it comes to company valuation. Now, I recognize that you might be working in a business that's not looking toward an acquisition anytime soon. Maybe you haven't started thinking about exit planning, but the reality is that every founder and owner exits somehow, sometime, in some way, and it's a really important thing to be purposeful about thinking about the value that you're creating in the business. So today, Channing is going to share with us some key areas that drive value for your company and provide some really tangible tools, like a checklist that buyers look for, that every integrator ought to know, because your visionary is trusting you to be an advisor also in the creation of this business value and be with them in this process. So Channing, we're so grateful to have you here with us today. I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen share so you can start yours. And I'm handing over the virtual microphone to you at the same time.
Cool. Thanks for having me, and excited to be here. Let me see if I can figure out the screen sharing thing. There it is. How's that looking?
Looks great, Channing.
Okay. Yeah. So this is a topic that I speak on somewhat regularly, and this could be like hours and hours of droning on and on. But what I've tried to do for you guys is just kind of plan to hit the high points. Our firm, as you've probably figured out if you know how to read, we do investment banking and business valuation. One of the observations I've had over the years is a lot of our clients come to us wanting to sell their company, but they really haven't taken the time to prepare properly. And then they don't sort of fully understand the process and what's required to sell a company for a premium. So what I wanted to do for you all, who are all, integrators and integral in building and growing your companies, is give you some things to think about in the day-to-day, so that you can work on preparing the business to be sold and to be sold for a premium. And really what we see is there are two things. Our broker dealer asks us to do this disclosure stuff, which I won't read. There's two things that I wanted to talk about just very briefly today. One is, what are the things we should be thinking about in our companies that are value drivers? Like how do we make the company more valuable? That's the first thing that I want to talk about. And then the second thing is, once you're understanding how to make a company more valuable, there's a process that we use when we sell a company to create competition and create an auction so that we can get the best value. And I want to just educate a little bit on the process, but generally speaking, in the day-to-day of running the company, focus on making it more valuable. And then when you're ready to sell, utilize a process that's going to extract maximum value. I mean, that's really sort of the idea behind this. And so in terms of exit preparation and value drivers, the first thing that we see is a lot of business owners have a number of issues. And I think these are things, as integrators and COOs, you all can really help your ownership group with, and help yourselves with, to the extent you're part of the ownership group. On the personal side, many business owners don't know, quote unquote, their number. They don't have a realistic understanding of the value of the business. There's a lot of tax and estate planning that can be done to maximize the after-tax proceeds of a sale of a company. It really doesn't matter what you sell your company for, the top line. What at the end of the day matters is how much lands in your bank account. And there are a lot of things that you're doing today, years and years or decades in advance of selling the company, that can have a massive tax impact. And then there's personal and family issues. If you don't know what you're going to do after a sale, or don't fully understand the legacy and what you're looking for all of your stakeholders, whether you have kids or relatives in the business, important customers, important employees, really understanding and having a plan around all of that is helpful. And I think I always like to think of these as foundational issues for a company. And if you don't really know how much you need, what your company is worth, don't understand the tax element, which is the biggest expense in a sale, don't know what you're going to do, and haven't talked to your family about it, you really haven't built a foundation to even focus on the business stuff in terms of preparing for an exit. And so engaging in a dialogue around this personal stuff is super important. And then on the business side, I worked at a private equity firm early in my career. And one of the things we did when we bought or invested in a company is we would sit down with the CEO and the entire management team and talk about our investment plan. You know, what are the things that we see in this business that are value drivers? And what are things that we see in this business that could detract from value? And we would actually ask the management team to put a scorecard or a report together, and we'd review it with them at board meetings. And some companies we met with monthly, some quarterly, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I have subsequently spent like 20 years working with private companies, helping them sell their business. I have yet to see a company come to me with a value driver scorecard. You know, private equity firms earn on average a 25 to 30% annual return on their investment in the companies they invest in. So they're doing something right, and focusing on the value drivers is one of the things they're doing and doing well. Yet a lot of companies that are entrepreneur-led, visionary-led, et cetera, aren't doing this, and it can make a really big difference. A couple other things that we frequently see are underinvestment in finance team and reporting systems, lack of accurate budgeting and forecasting, other management team members where that sort of aren't in the loop and may not show well to buyers, you know, inarticulate or undefined strategic plan. You know, all of you guys are on some kind of leadership system and participating in this integrator community, so you probably don't have that. But that can make a really big difference. And then a lot of companies don't really have a forward-looking forecast that will hold up to scrutiny. And so these are sort of the core issues that we see time and time again with companies that come to us and want to sell. And so that's sort of like a foundational thing. The next thing, I have a checklist here, and I won't go through this in detail, but the kind of, and this presentation is going to be made available. Each company and each industry sector have different value drivers and different things to think about to drive value. And so I would encourage each of you to think about your company, your industry, and what are the things that drive value. You know, a lot of people talk about, you know, revenue and EBITDA. Like, you don't need a speaker to come and tell you that if you have more profit, your company is worth more. You know, that's pretty obvious. But there's a lot of other things going on in the world that drive very significant value. You know, being aware of what's going on in your industry and the market cycle. Having a management team, having no buyer is going to write the owners a big check if they're involved in every element of the business. You need to point to continuity of the business in order to get a buyer to write you a big check. Intellectual property is important. The desired business metrics, revenue and EBITDA. There's a bunch of other considerations to think about. Predictability and building predictability into the business is critically important. At the end of the day, value is driven by a buyer's perception of risk. And so the more you have predictability, the less you have risk, et cetera. Value detractors. This is a big one that a lot of companies aren't aware of and don't think about. We've had a number of examples where we've tried to sell companies that have one or two big customers, and those customers don't want to work with the new buyer. You can't sell the business if you're reliant on one or two customers. A buyer won't take that risk. Employment practices, litigation, lack of a management team, strong financial reporting, sloppy processes, reliance on key individuals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of these things are easily solvable over a long period of time, but they're very difficult to solve in a short period of time. And so putting some thought into this stuff now, so that when the ownership group in your company wants to sell, you don't have a fatal flaw. And so this is a good checklist to sit down and talk to your management team about and look at. And then the final thing is buyers come in and do due diligence. And, most of the transactions that our firm works on are between kind of 20 to 25 million in value at the low end, up to 150 to 200 million in value at the high end. And what we found is that before a buyer of a company writes a check, they actually probably know the business as well as or better than the seller. And they come in and they do very thorough due diligence. And so there's 7 streams of due diligence that are very common. And, being organized and ready for this is critically important, particularly if you want to sell the business for a premium. If you show up and you're disorganized and you can't easily produce half this stuff, it raises red flags. And so buyers come in and really scrutinize the financial projections in the business. They come in and they do a really thorough accounting review. The terminology we use is quality of earnings, or Q of E. Full legal review. They'll review like every contract down to the copier leases. Tax returns, taxes. They want to make sure all of the taxes are paid and paid correctly. That includes sales tax, local taxes, as well as all the income taxes. Many buyers are now coming in and doing cultural assessments and looking at employment practices. Our firm is based in California, which has a heavy emphasis on employment practices. We've had clients that are underinsured. That causes problems. So making sure the insurance is up to date and correct. And then technology and intellectual property, having all of your patents, trademarks, et cetera, well documented and clean, and working with an IP attorney can make a huge difference in surviving a due diligence stream. And then, for other companies that are in regulated industries, there's a lot of regulatory work that buyers come in and do. None of these due diligence things are hard, but it does take time to have all of your documents organized and have proper process and procedures around these compliance activities. And my observation, and the reason I put this in this presentation, is a lot of people who are in the integrator role are a little bit more organized than the people that are in the visionary CEO role. You can ask Mandy, who's on this call and is our integrator, and she'll tell you that's the case. And so a lot of being organized and having this stuff put together falls on your shoulders, and incorporating this into the day-to-day of running the business makes it easier to run the business and makes it easier when it comes time to respond to an offer or sell the business. And so that's what I've got on kind of the value drivers and the preparation. And again, I went through that really quickly, and there's stories behind each of these, but I felt like these checklists would be helpful for you guys to look at and, possibly talk to your CEOs and visionaries about, and other management team members, and start putting a value enhancement and a risk mitigation plan in place. And then the second thing I wanted to do is just do a little bit of education on the investment banker sale process. A lot of companies that we see get approached by one buyer, and they share some information, they engage in some dialogue, they get a mediocre offer, and then they're in a situation where they're not really sure what to do. The process that we've seen work the best is to have a proactive, organized, and disciplined process designed to maximize value. And that's what I'm going to walk you through. But, first of all, an investment bank should show up and have a number of objectives with the process. The first one, and the reason our firm gets hired somewhat regularly, is we're good at getting the best price and terms. The other ones are equally, if not more important. Engaging with the right buyers, being sure you really, you've talked to all of the right buyers and you know whether they're interested and at what price. Giving you an opportunity and your management team an opportunity to interview multiple buyers and see which one is going to be the right partner. Like most people that sell their companies have put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and time and effort into building it. And there are a lot of relationships and stakeholders involved: employees, family members, customers, vendors, et cetera. And most of our clients want to sell to a buyer, whether it's a strategic buyer or a financial investor, that are going to take care of their stakeholders that have helped them build over, decades. And then the final one is having a clear understanding of your objectives. When it comes time to sign on the dotted line to sell, you don't want to be sitting there wondering, is there another buyer out there? Could I sell it for more? Could I get a better deal? And so by running this disciplined process where you engage with a broad enough group of buyers, you should have a really good sense of what the market is and that you're getting a good deal. There's some pillars of success for running a good process. In the upper left here, strategic positioning. A lot of the companies we work with are very good at describing what their business does. A good investment bank will take that and then describe to buyers why it's valuable. And those aren't always the same thing. Like, I make widgets and these widgets are really cool because X, Y, and Z. That's interesting. But then when you take that and it's like, hey, the Mr. or Mrs. Buyer, these widgets are really valuable to your company for the following reasons, makes it a much more specific and compelling sales pitch. And so a good investment bank will do that. The second one is bringing buyer relationships to the table. The third one is running a disciplined process so you get all the buyers to show up at the same place at the same time, and you can create a competitive environment and have strong negotiation leverage. And then the fourth one is having the people on your team that are working on selling your company believing they can tell your story and tell it well. And what we found time and time again is if you do those four things well, you can set up a process and an environment that's designed to get a premium. And then mechanically how it works, a typical sale process would be in the range of 6 to 9 months. Probably 9 months is a good sort of planning thought. We spend 2 to 3 months up front in the positioning phase, understanding the objectives, coming up with the strategy, putting all of the materials together, working with our clients, figuring out which buyers to go to, and really getting everything organized so that we've really put our best foot forward and we have a compelling package. And we do all of that before we talk to a single buyer, because we believe the first impression matters. And then in the second phase, the execution phase, that's where we go out and execute and engage with buyers. And this is a 2 to 4 month process, depending on the industry and how many buyers you go to. It's done in a confidential way where all of the buyers sign a non-disclosure agreement. We're careful about what information we share. And at the end of that execution phase, we're asking for initial indications of interest. And you may have heard the term from investment bankers or other people, IOI, initial indication of interest. These are initial offers. We take those initial offers and we look at them and we narrow down to a smaller group of buyers that gave us good offers, seem like they have a high probability of closing and have the financial wherewithal. And then we invite them into the auction process and have them bid against each other. And we pick one, excuse me, and then we would pick one and then negotiate and close the transaction. And it's kind of, again, the positioning phase. It depends a little bit on how organized the company is when they show up to work with us, but that would be 2 to 3 months. The execution phase could be 2 to 4 months, depending on how many buyers we go to and what the market's like. And then from the time you sign a letter of intent, which spells out all of the terms and typically would grant a buyer exclusivity, it's 60 to 90 days to close a transaction. And so when you add that up, it's kind of a 9-month process. And
See,
so
Channing, I hate to interrupt you so rudely, but we are kind of toward the end, and I just wanted to
I'm
make
done.
sure you had, oh, perfect timing then. I'll let you land the plane before I fully take the mic back.
That was my last page. And so basically what I wanted to do is quickly give you some tools to think about how to build a valuable company and the things to think about to build value and eliminate risks. And then just give you a quick education on what we believe is a very good process to get a premium when it does come time to do a transaction. And that's pretty much what I had.
That's awesome. Channing, this is like, to overuse the word value, such valuable content. And we could have a very deep conversation about any of these components, but I will tell you, one of the most valuable presentations I ever heard was on the topic of value creation. And our business has been pretty rigorously looking at these value drivers for the last 2 years. And it's been a real eye opener. And one of the areas that we as a young company, a 6-year-old company, recognized was we still had too high of an owner dependency, right? Jennifer's in too many spots doing too many things. And that's been what we've been working on solving as a really important value driver. And the other thing that I would point out is that even though the word marketing never appeared in Channing's presentation, so much of the role of strategic marketing is around your unique value proposition and the messaging of that and the training of your team on how to deliver that high value story that's of true differentiation. And one thing we see frequently at Authentic Brand, just to steal a minute to pontificate here, is that many brilliant entrepreneurial companies have done the great work of building their operating system framework. And for instance, in EOS terms, addressing the small box called marketing strategy with your 3 uniques. But what we see with that is that those 3 uniques are often still self-focused. We pride ourselves on this, we do this, and they have not been translated into a go-to-market message that uniquely positions you with a high value story. So I just wanted to tag that on because so much of the work that we do to take a strong business plan and create value for the organization is around that concept of the right message, the right position, the right IP around your brand and the culture and that experience. So this is
one
brilliant.
of the things I would just like to add to that in the value creation check, and there's a note here in the chat that yes, we can share the presentation, but a couple of things in the value drivers are building repeatable processes and having an accurate forecast. And so marketing, which is the top end of the funnel and bringing new customers in, having a repeatable and predictable lead generation system is like a critical value driver for every single company. And so, I didn't say that explicitly. It's like implicitly part of building in repeatability and predictability into a business.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you, Channing. This was really great stuff. And we will be including the deck and the checklists and all of this great and additional resources in our follow-up. And I know that Channing and his team would be delighted to connect with any of you that have questions about how you might approach this idea of value creation, because it does take time. There are a lot of building blocks. And all of you are right at the intersection of all these pieces in your business. So that's a big job. And we're here to support you with it. So thank you, Channing. We are a little